boys will use boys' bathrooms and girls will use girls' bathrooms in Montana, and locker rooms, and there's no gray area.
Welcome back to the Family Matters podcast. I'm Derek A. Stryker, Chief Legal Counsel for the Montana Family Foundation. Really thrilled to have our guest here today, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Susie Hedelin. And I think the first question is the obvious question. If we have Attorney General and we shorten that to General, and the governor might be the Gov, what do they call you, Super Susie?
Soup, yes.
Soup? They call you Soup?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, obviously, education is at the forefront of everyone's mind right now. One of our last guests was Finley Warden, and he talked about some of the things that he discovered at the recent Teachers Union conference here in Montana. That has sparked a number of things, some public outrage, and obviously people on the other side coming and saying, there's nothing to see here. But you've taken some action. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So Speaker Rieger and I have put a bill out. It's actually the first bill draft for the 2027 legislative session to put an end to these days being held sacred for teacher union conferences. It's an archaic practice. Schools are closed, on these random days in October. We hear a lot from parents that don't have childcare on those days.
Yeah.
And there's so many different options out there these days for teachers to earn their professional development, renewal units, and to get that high quality professional development. The OPI offers Summer Institute. So in the summer where it's not impacting where education has to be canceled or those kinds of things, we have a variety of options. There's also some great examples in Great Falls that Maelstrom Air Force Base partners with the school district, and teachers can go learn about how to support military families, which is really incredible.
Yeah.
So there's just so many different high quality options out there. And what we've seen, from some of the workshops that were held is just content that conflicts with our state and federal law and is really giving education a bad name. Yeah,
no, certainly. And one of the things that really struck me in the interview with Finley, and I know we talked about this a little bit beforehand, is the teachers were actually being instructed to lie, to be deceptive about DEI, CRT. If they've got any pushback, just pretend like they didn't know what the parents were talking about. I mean, that was really troubling for me. Have you seen that when you've given school districts some pushback? Have they pretended not to know what you're talking about?
I haven't gotten into those conversations specifically with schools, but my whole goal and a big reason I wanted to run for office for state superintendent is to help build trust in our education system and to have parents feel comfortable and trusting that they can drop their students off at school every day, just like they did in the communities when I was a superintendent, because I didn't allow for those kinds of things to go on. I believe school is a place for learning. We've heard it from parents time and time again. They want their children to learn how to read, write, and do math. These other conversations should be left to the parents and for home. And we have got to build that trust back in our school system. We're seeing declining enrollment. And these groups are, they say they're the big promoters of public education. They're doing these tactics that are harming our public education system and the trust that our parents have in our schools. And the biggest thing for me is how do we build that trust? How do we get the parents involved more? How do we share what we are teaching and include the parents in it so that we have some buy-in with them and they can feel comfortable dropping their students off? I greeted families when they dropped their kids off at my district just a year ago, and to know that they could trust us and what we were going to teach them that day. And so this is it's sad to hear it going the other way.
Yeah, parents are entrusting schools with their most valuable thing in this life, their children, and trust erodes when you're being lied to. I mean, I just think that's fundamental. So to hear that being taught at the teachers conference was just startling. So this legislation that you've introduced with President Regier, I guess the idea is just to do away with these days entirely.
Yes. So the goal is to the main purpose of the bill is to remove that archaic part of law that says schools must close for those 2 days for union conferences. There's also, some teachers that feel pressure to go and attend these conferences, and then they're subjected to all of these different professional development classes where some are pretty blatant. We did finally track down the agenda, but some of the contents of these sessions are kind of hidden under other things. So it's to remove that. I think a big part of it is also to allow local flexibility. Our communities know what they need. Our educators and our local school leaders know what they need to work on and what they need professional development on. So let them choose. And let's get back to that flexibility, that local control. A lot of districts like to have their professional development before school starts, especially if they're implementing a new reading curriculum or something like that, so they can get their staff ready to go. Some would rather do it mid-year as a check-in, or just allow for the virtual options. And so it's not saying that schools can't still choose to close those days. We've heard from some folks that love to go hunting on those days. I'm a hunter, I understand.
Sure.
But you can choose to take a day off at some other point. So just give that flexibility and that control back to the districts to set their own calendar, because it does create a hardship trying to get you only have so many days, you have to get so many hours in the calendar.
Right.
So let them have that control and decide when they want to hold those days, how they want to hold those days.
Yeah. Well, it just seems to make sense that you could accomplish your professional development when school's not in session. You don't have to close down in the middle of October. You can take those courses during the summer, like you mentioned, or maybe during the Christmas break. That just seems to be a smarter move. I don't know, but so I'm glad you're doing that. That's great. You've been busy in other areas too. A couple of years ago during the Biden administration, we had reports from a family in a school district here in Montana that there was a boy, a biological male, using the girls' restroom and the locker room. And this was making families and young teenage girls really uncomfortable. Some were deciding not to play sports. Some were, really scared to use the restroom. It just bizarre that we even have to deal with something like this. And pretty much on day one of Trump's second term, he said in pretty clear terms, we're not going to have this bizarre interpretation of Title IX anymore. We're actually going to restore it to its original purpose, that pushing girls out of their private, intimate spaces like a restroom or a locker room, changing room, is sex discrimination under Title IX, under federal law. And so schools need to step in line. And that hasn't just been empty words. The Trump administration has actually gone out to Virginia and Colorado and has formed a special investigations team to take a look at school district policies and ensure that they comply with Title IX. The Montana Family Foundation sent out a letter to all the school districts in Montana, just reminding them. It was our Dear Colleague letter to the school districts saying, look, not sure, there's been a lot of flip-flopping with different administrations in terms of how they interpret Title IX, but here's the status of the law. Let's make sure that we're not discriminating against girls in schools in Montana. And that, as far as we know, has been well received, and there aren't any school districts that are not in compliance, at least at this point. You've sent out a Dear Colleague letter of your own, because federal law is so important for funding. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and thank you so much for the work of the Family Foundation
Yeah.
and your active involvement in the legislative session. It was great to stand together
Yes.
for common sense.
Yes.
For the safety of our students and our country. So we have sent out guidance. We've sent out Dear Colleague letters, the most recent reminding schools that they signed an agreement to Title VI that they would not teach DEI,
Yes.
that they would not, break any of those guidances, and that they understood by accepting their federal funding from the Office of Public Instruction, they were held accountable to those standards. So we sent out a reminder, especially, some of the things that were taught at that conference were in direct infringement with what the districts agreed that
Yes.
they would not do. So we had to send out a reminder to districts that, their federal funding is at stake. Their accreditation can be at stake, which
Yes.
is also the big thing that people think about is, their ability to have athletic teams is tied to their accreditation. Teachers sign a code of ethics when they get their Montana teaching license. There's a lot of different things at stake here. Our professional development providers have to be authorized by the Office of Public Instruction. So we had already started reviewing and requiring more from them, but we have a whole new data system as part of our modernization project that's going to allow us to use technology to better analyze the folks providing the professional development. So the Dear Colleague letters are really important. We do weekly newsletters to remind districts of different legislation to make sure they're following it and provide guidance. Katie Bloodgood from our office does a really good job. There's a booklet with all high level to very in-depth details on how districts need to implement these and work through different decisions. And so we work, regularly to help schools be in compliance with these. That's our goal, is to help them be top notch and be doing the right things.
Yes.
And we've stood together with Carrie Seekins Crow and others to say, boys will use boys' bathrooms and girls will use girls' bathrooms in
Yes.
Montana, and locker rooms, and there's no gray area. Unfortunately, our facilities are not always up to par where there's another bathroom option.
Yeah.
I heard from a caller this week that there was a child having to use the staff bathroom because there was some confusion on whether the girls or the boys. Unfortunately, that is making those teachers uncomfortable, but we cannot put the students at risk in those situations, which is just part of the reality of what we're facing in this day and age.
Yeah. Oh, it's bizarre. Well, and I think certainly, I think that's the option in that situation, is the staff bathroom, rather than jeopardizing the safety of children. It is bizarre. It is bizarre dealing with this. I want to go back to something that you talked about, the teacher's code of ethics. What all is in the teacher's code of ethics, just out of curiosity?
So the teacher's code of ethics is kind of what you would think of just like rights and wrongs, right?
Yeah.
And how you would want to see someone behave as a professional. I'm sure as an attorney, you have a
Yes.
similar ethical standard that you're
Yes.
held to. So it's along those lines. I will tell you, while I served on the Board of Public Education, there was an attempt to add DEI into the Code of Ethics during the Biden administration, and I was able to stand against that,
Yes.
and we were able to ensure that did not get added into the teacher's Code of Ethics while I was on the Board of Public Education previously.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. My curiosity was sparked there because it was part of our ethical obligation as attorneys to be honest in our dealings. And so I guess what troubles me, I'm going back to this topic at the conference of teaching teachers or instructing teachers during a session to be dishonest and to be deceptive about DEI. That as far as I understood, it was coming from a representative of the National Teachers Union who was flown in to the conference by the Montana Teachers Union, I'm sure paid for by the Montana Teachers Union. And that instruction goes directly against the what I can only assume is in the Teachers Code of Ethics, which would be, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm just troubled by that. And again, you talked about it, an earlier push to put DEI in the Code of Ethics. Why is this the agenda?
It just goes back to that whole movement we're seeing in our nation of, making everything about indoctrination and wanting to start our students in kindergarten with these transgender unicorns and things. And it's very disheartening. And I just try to go back to where I think we can all find common ground on, just let schools be places of learning. Just let students, let's have the alphabet up, not flags, not any of this that needs to take place at home. I, don't condone things on either side of extremism in the classroom. I just want schools to be places of learning, reading, writing, and math where everyone can feel comfortable. And I think we've really got to get back to that. This, ideology and all of these different components are just taking away from our education system. And, Jody Etchhart is the representative that carried the bill last time to take away from these union days, and we didn't get the support we needed. I really think we need to have people get more involved in education, and it's exciting that it's starting to get more traction, and it's taking these very extreme negative events to happen, but local school board elections matter. Yes. Local school boards determine curriculum. I can't tell you how many times a week I get a text or a call with a book. Why is this book being taught? Why are my kids reading this? And I said, and I have to let people know that that's a local control issue. They need to talk to their school board about that. So we need to make sure that those we're involved in our local school board elections. Yes. And then all the way up to the bathroom bill you were just talking about, that's still held up in court because we need to make sure that we elect judges that are going to do the right thing.
Well, and we've talked about that before on the show, that perhaps the most important issue on the ballot this next session, if it gets on the ballot, is a constitutional initiative to enshrine nonpartisan judicial elections in the state of Montana, both for Supreme Court justices and for district court judges. And what that would mean is that the low information, generally low information voters that are voting in elections in Montana have little to no information about who we're putting in black robes. And I think that's by design. That's why it's being pushed, because there's a lot of control over the judges. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a super veto for common sense legislation, like boys use the boys' bathroom and girls use the girls' bathroom.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's really important. I'm glad you brought it up. And of course, we have a Supreme Court justice seat up this next election cycle. Dan Wilson is a judge out of Kalispell, the Flathead area, who's running for Supreme Court. I think an excellent jurist and would make an excellent Supreme Court justice. So we have some important elections.
Yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, and I just think it's important to make sure that people are called to action and getting involved. I encouraged my teachers every time they were going to start a new novel, especially, I love involving new literature and things that are exciting that the students can really get into, things more of like pop culture, right? So we just need to make sure that we're being transparent, and it really just helps bring the parents in and build those relationships. So we have the legislation that requires parents to opt in to lessons of certain content.
Yes.
However, I encouraged my staff when, I was a superintendent just a year ago, anytime we're going to start a new novel, a new book, anything that could even be any bit questioned by any family, why not just send the synopsis home? You can pull it off the internet in 3 minutes and send it home, ask the parents to sign the slip. It starts a conversation in the home. Sometimes we find then the parent goes out and gets the book also, reads it with the student. It gives them something to talk about what their students are learning, and engages. And every time they get that piece of paper that the teacher is being transparent, that wants to let the parents know what they're teaching in the classroom rather than feeling like they're trying to hide it, that builds trust in our public school system.
Right.
And so I don't want to hear the conversations that it's causing too much work. It takes a couple of minutes and it builds relationships at home. It builds relationships between the home and school. And I just think it's very important.
Well, it seems to be vital. If you're going to be teaching someone's kids, you want to have a relationship. And you want to have an honest relationship with the parents. It just seems vital to education as a whole. So I just appreciate your stance on building transparency and trust into the public school system, especially when enrollment is declining. And I think that's a reaction to some of the distrust that parents have felt for the public school system. So restoring that trust, I think, is so important.
Yeah, we have, work to do. We have plenty of work to do in reading and math. We were just reviewing our state scores yesterday. We're getting ready for release. And we definitely have some challenges. We definitely have some work to do in different areas. I am excited. We have some of the highest ACT scores in the country. Some of, the highest percentage of perfect scores, just some really, really cool data facts like that we'll get to share. But we also have low performance in third grade in reading, and we know that that's a critical time. And so we need to make sure we're focusing on high quality instruction that helps our students to be literate and not teaching social issues. We need to make sure that we're teaching our kids how to be critical thinkers and not what to think. And that's where I think our country's taken a wrong turn in some regards. I do also just want to say that there are phenomenal teachers across Montana. I worked my whole career in the public school system. I am a champion. I'm here to try to strengthen our public school system. I know we have incredible leaders out there that are standing strong in believing that we need to do the right thing. And these folks that are, not being transparent, that are participating in these sessions and speaking up about not being honest to parents are taking away from all of that great work. And so I just want to thank all of the incredible educators and leaders across Montana that are doing the right thing. And sometimes you can feel like a lone wolf out there. So I'm just thankful for them and their great work, and want to make sure that we can highlight that and not have these unfortunate circumstances taken away from it in Montana.
Oh, I think that's entirely true. There are so many great teachers in this state, and so many that just love kids and want to see them reach their fullest potential. I think it's like any profession. I'm a lawyer. I know so many incredible lawyers who are just above board, so honest and forthright, and just wonderful human beings and wonderful lawyers. And lawyers get a bad rap too, Susie. So it's because of the few that are a little different than I think the majority. And some of this really isn't about the teachers, though. It's really about these agenda-driven special interest groups like the National Teachers Union or the Montana Teachers Union that are pushing this agenda on well-meaning teachers and saying this is what you need to do in order to push DEI and CRT on kids in the classroom, and then lie to their parents. And so you don't really even blame the teachers there. It's really,
Definitely.
Why are you pushing this on our teachers? We don't need that. That's not education. That is indoctrination. And that's not building trust or transparency into the public school system.
Exactly. These national groups, we've got to push back. We have taken a thorough look at all of our agreements. There's MOUs that we've had in place for many years that we're not signing because we've identified components of DEI in them. And our job is to ensure we continue to have best practices and that we're doing the right thing so that the funding can continue to flow to Montana. So We're closely evaluating everything. And these national groups are going to work themselves out of business if they don't get on board, as far as I'm concerned, unless other states are going to continue. We're not going to be working with groups like this. And that is a component that I'm hoping, our local groups reflect on and consider, parting ways with these national groups if they want to continue in Montana. So that we can get back on track, because we can just not condone what they're bringing to Montana.
Yeah. Well, and that saves taxpayer dollars too. I mean, we're not going to be funding these national groups that are pushing an agenda from either side of the extreme, like you talked about, because we're not pushing one side or the other. So, Susie, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's so great to have you. And thank you so much for all the work you're doing to restore trust and transparency into the public school system.
I appreciate all that you do and for taking a stance and supporting parents and our school system in Montana. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, on behalf of the Montana Family Foundation, thanks for joining us. If you like this kind of content, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button and the little bell or whatever you do to make sure that you never miss an episode. Thank you. God bless.